Welcome to Let's Accelerate. We are Michael and Sauter from Bosch Management Consulting Innovation. Today we have very special guests from Robert Bosch Venture Capital, Johannes Grabowski and Sabrina Jones. First question is, what is Robert Bosch Venture Capital and what is its mission? And what are your roles there?
All right.
Should I? Okay. So Robert Bosch Venture Capital is the VC arm of the Bosch Group, and it's been around for 12 years. So a lot of experience and a lot of companies that have been invested in so far. There's about 50 or 60 portfolio companies that we have at the moment.
Yeah.
And on top of the investments that we do, which are very financially driven, we have a strong agenda to bring innovation to Bosch from the outside. And that's why 3 years ago we launched Open Bosch. And Johannes, you can say something about what we do there.
Yeah, right. Because when you said you're from RBVC, that's right. RBVC is our employer, but we started a bigger network called Open Bosch. You can find it in the internet, openbosch.com, easy to find. And it's basically a startup partnership program that we roll out globally. And the aim is to come into action with startups and with startup technology real fast and to create tangible business out of it. And this is so to say the other mission of RBVC. Besides investing, we are really setting up partnerships, business relationships with that big corporate, and we're helping that.
Why should companies work with startups? I mean, don't they already have all the innovation capabilities you could ever imagine?
Well, actually, yes, they do have everything, but not enough of it.
Okay.
So my view on it is, and it's very obvious because we see that also from an investment standpoint, the future is uncertain. There are thousands of ways, and Bosch, as a corporate and any other corporate in this world, cannot anticipate all future outcomes that there are. And innovation has turned to be extremely fast. So today, our innovation cycles that we see in the corporate world are so short. And since we cannot anticipate all of these outcomes, we need to partner up and we need to be fast in partnering up. So that is one of the reasons. It's just a time game. On the other side of the equation is it's also money driven. You know, startups conquer the space and a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them have much more financial power behind their innovation what we as a big corporate can even afford, since these future outcomes are so spread and we cannot invest this much money in any of these outcomes. So,
and this is also, this is an evolution of how this hasn't been like this forever, right? 10
Right.
years ago it was different, but because there's so much money in venture capital, there's billions of dollars funded.
That shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, right. I guess every corporate has pockets as deep as that. No, but there's a lot more funding in startups these days than just a decade ago.
Yeah.
And this is also the reason why there's just, an army of people out there, really, really smart people too, who just have the capabilities and resources to tackle the most pressing problems of our time.
Yeah.
And we see this not as a threat, but actually as a chance to work with them and to incorporate their products into ours or vice versa, or
use their technology to become more efficient.
Nice.
There are so many ways.
So technology is one way, right, to partner, and I believe you mentioned partnership in a broader sense. What are some other ways that are less obvious to partner with a startup that can give you an advantage in your business model?
So I think, and a lot of people ask the question, how do you define a partnership? And many people say a typical customer-vendor relationship, they wouldn't not consider a partnership. But I think when it comes to startups, there's a lot of special needs in in the beginning of this relationship, and you cannot treat them like typical suppliers, especially in the automotive industry, right? So that's why we have this program to alleviate these pains around setting up a partnership and forming trust and so on. And a lot of times this can end in a customer-vendor relationship where we use the product of the startup to get our processes better, to enhance our production facilities, use software tools internally.
Hey,
Yeah, but why so now it seems to be still difficult to integrate a startup into a corporate. Why is that? What do you feel it's the most critical point to make this partnership and integration on the ecosystem?
Actually, I don't think it's really hard. What we experienced, it's extremely easy if you integrate it on process side. Okay, if we use startups to become more efficient in what we are doing, in the way we are doing it, and may it be in a production or engineering, then it becomes real fast. The harder thing to tackle really is getting startups into product innovation. So enriching our products or even creating a new product. Or Michael, what you said, and Sabrina a little bit danced around it, getting them as a partner for business model innovation, really, in certain fields. That is the tougher nut to crack.
Why though? Why is that? Why is it so much tougher?
My experience personally is it's a claiming game at the end of the day. At the end of the day, it's always this discussion, okay, how do we share the revenues at the end of the day? And you know what? And this happens all the time when we talk to startups and they are, I'm really blunt here. And this happens very often. Startups very often have this a little bit, they are a little bit over the top with what they think they bring in as value. So many of them coming with value-based pricing and say, well, basically this is kind of like, this is the next rocket science that I invented. And therefore, these things get stuck in a way. Or what also happens is that there's this constant thought of the internal world, can we even, we cannot control this partner. Do we want to do that? Do we want to be dependent of them? And what happens,
Is it a trust issue then, in that case?
No, I think another aspect is that it's simply also a lot easier in terms of understanding what the value is. If you think about a process innovation in a plant, it's very easy to calculate what benefit was at the end of the day versus if you start to create a new business. We all know how difficult it is to launch internal new businesses, how difficult it is for startups to launch new businesses. Now, if we talk about doing this together, it just adds more complexity and more insecurity, and this makes it harder.
And what are your ideas to overcome this difficulty?
I think the ideas are, well, basically, without top-level management support, we will not overcome this issue. So we need top-level management support for these cases, and we are pulling them in this respect. The other thing is we need to learn from the process area, also for the product area. So the learnings we are doing, because again, we had set up so many partnerships in the last year, really working partnerships in that process area. And it's so easy because we can calculate it, we can somewhat foresee it. Taking these learnings, applying them also for that product area is something that will really, really help. And we right now have, I would say, around about 10 to 15 or 20 even POCs running in the product innovation area. And I see so many positive results right now that I'm pretty sure that we are overcoming that burden.
Do you think that part of the issue is, and I'll hand this to Sabrina, that the two worlds don't understand each other very well? And I say that coming from the corporate side, there's a lot of glitz and glamour associated with working with startups. They're faster, they're cooler, they have cool offices. Is that part of it? it seems that there's a big mythology built around startups.
I think there's some some of this glamour that people associate with it, but once you get to a concrete to concrete wish or demand that we want to follow internally, and we say, okay, let's look for an appropriate startup partner here, it sort of, the glamour goes in the background. But
Definitely.
what
Definitely.
remains, there's still there's still differences in culture and especially in expectations. So one thing we should not forget is, for an external startup, it's nearly impossible to understand the processes that are ongoing internally, how decisions are made, who's calling the shots, where is the budget coming from, what are the legal terms, how does purchasing work. They just have no idea. And quite frankly, a lot of our colleagues don't have an idea either. So this is where we come into play. And this is what I would also recommend to all the startups out there is, if you find a corporate who has a venture client unit, such as ours, such as Open Bosch, that is a tremendous help, because we help the startup to navigate through the organization, and thereby translating a little bit between these different worlds. And at the same time, we help our internal colleagues to overcome all the process hurdles of administrative things, legal issues, IP issues, purchasing, all the things you need to consider.
Yeah, one thing we hear a lot is that startups are faster and corporates are much slower. So, what is the truth there? And you can take that in any direction. One is, do they get to market faster or do they not? And the other is just their working style, is it faster? There are two different directions you could probably go with that.
Well, you know what I see also from the VC world. At the end of the day, innovation, and if you want to bring into the world something really new, something really disruptive, it takes years, no matter what. Until you can sell your startup, it's typically 5 to 8 years time until somebody else sees so much value in your startup that he's able to buy it, or you bring it to the stock market. So it's a long time frame still that startups have. Funnily, if you look into corporate innovation, and if you look in the more far-reaching innovation campaigns that we have, so innovation projects that lie into the second or third horizon, you'll find the same time scale here. So at the end of the day, innovation is always a tough beast. It also is always something that you have to tackle. It's always a marathon rather than a sprint. And this is true for startups and for corporates the same. But what startups can do, they can maneuver much, much quicker in between. This is something they are specifically good at. And we have seen that, working with a startup, that they are able to set up a POC and set up a demonstration, for example, for external customers within 3 weeks. It was done. And we had a scenario when a startup was sitting, while we were doing the demo, they were sitting in the room next door. They flew all the way across from Israel to be here, so incredibly much commitment. And they want to be there. They want to make sure that it works out all right.
So just listening to that, one of the advantages of working with them is easier access to do in-market experiments, right? So you can kind of outsource some of that experimental risk to them because they just can do it faster and you get your answer faster.
Yeah, we have nice examples of where we did that, actually.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, it's one thing is still the truth, because in the early days, startups are faster, but in the later stage, when it comes to scaling, a big corporate is still very, very good at that. And this is the reason why timescales at the end of the day are pretty much the same, and why there's so much synergy. Because if we would take the power in the early stages and apply our power as a corporate in the later stages, this is where really the magic comes in.
So you will work like a bridge, basically, and to bring the best of both worlds. So the flexibility and fastness to go to market and do experiments from the startups, and the robustness from the structure and processes from a big corporation like Bosch, right? Michael, maybe we can go now to our final part of this podcast.
I had one more question because Sara and I, before
Okay.
this podcast, we were discussing. We have ideas for a startup, and we're coming to you, and we come to Sabrina and Johannes,
Again.
and we say, "Hey, can you help us? We're interested in working with your corporation. How do you two concretely help us to determine whether it could be a good partnership or not? How do you go about that?"
So, yeah, that's the unfortunate thing now, I have to say, but we have to be blunt about it. You know, every year we see 1.3 million tech startups coming, to life every year. It's impossible to handle these 1.3 million. So we have created as RBVC a kind of like funnel, to filter out the most relevant. Because if startups are too early, for example, there will be no partnership. We will basically, be not able to work together.
Mhm.
So there must be a certain level of maturity. So what we are doing, we are handing over these leads to our investors to see, okay, is this company mature? Is this a good one? Is this interesting enough to follow up? And then they would bring it to the attention of the business units.
Mm-hmm.
If it is, no matter if it's an investment target or not, they will discuss it with the business unit. And if someone triggers, then we'll hop in. Then we'll hop in and say, okay, now let's get engaged. But what we can't do, we cannot be an extended sales arm for every startups out there.
Yeah, but
That
we're really good. I promise you.
I know, and all of these 1.3 million startups are really, really good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but we're
And
better
and
is the point.
And
yeah, right.
and Sabrina, if
Yeah.
I'm from
Okay.
Sabrina,
Yeah.
if I'm from a department within Bosch and I want to work with a startup, what should I do, or how can you help me as a responsible for a business unit or with a project in hand that I want to work with a startup? How can you help me?
Yeah, in this case, it's great. You just call us up, you give us a call or reach us at open@bosch.com. And typically what we do is we will get in touch and we will define your problem. So we'll look really deeply what is the need that you really have and how much is the lever, how much is the impact that a startup could bring here. And if this impact is big enough, then we say, let's go and look for the best startups out there. Because one thing is also, out of these 1.3 million startups, we are market leaders in so many areas. We need to have, we need to find and identify the very best, the top startups to work with. We cannot afford to waste our time and resources on working with startups that just don't make the cut, right? So
And part of that's just the high failure rate in general. So you have to do a lot of due diligence, right, before you can determine is this going to be one that sustains, right?
or you let other people do the due diligence,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if a startup already has a seed or Series A funding, that's typically a very good indicator that the company has some traction. So we don't need to look super deeply, but there is some check marks that you can take a look at. And once we identify the best companies for you, Sarah, then we would go and have demos with them, and we would go into deeper discussions about the impact of the partnership and also the scope of the POC, and prepare everything for you to have a great project with them.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, cool. So maybe I will get the startup from Michael.
Exactly.
I mean, you already have us. You can connect us right now. So
All right. So then we have here a final challenge for you. We will start 3 sentences, and you have to finish the sentence with 1 word or a very short finalizing. Okay. Maybe let's start with Johannes, and then we go to Sabrina, and then again to Johannes. Okay. Are you ready?
Ready.
Your outside initiative will be successful when?
In 2019.
Okay.
Already successful.
I was
Good.
gonna give the same answer.
Yeah.
Good. What
We're
was
working
significant
together
about
for a long time.
2000? What was significant about 2019?
Oh,
Well, we launched Open Bosch in 2018, and we are basically in a scaling mode right now. But what we can show already is actually a tremendous business impact that we have from the projects that we have done last year.
Very good.
right. So from investment standpoint, what we are doing here, it's a no-brainer. It's really a no-brainer for management. So every dollar put in here or every euro put in here multiplies really with a high factor.
All right. So Sabrina, next. The most common mistake interacting with startups is?
From a corporate side, is not knowing what you want. You have to be really specific and committed to finding a solution or really have a big problem. If you don't know what you want, a startup will not tell you. You have to figure it out yourself.
Does this happen often, Sabrina?
I think, in these days, I think in every company you have, it's a VUCA world, right? So we don't always know what is the right path and which way to go. So in that sense, I think it's definitely a commonality. Yeah.
All right. So final one, Johannes, are you ready?
Ready.
The next unicorn will be in the area of?
We have a unicorn in our portfolio.
Oh.
And this is it's a UK company. It's called GraphCore, and they make a chip designated to AI training. And this is a really great story. And
So I see that you two work well together because Sabrina bought you some time. Johannes, did you have time to think on this one? Knowing, because we always say nobody can pick winners, but we're asking you to try.
Yeah,
Let's
and
see.
that's the reason why I like the answer from Sabrina. I'm not so good in speculating what's going to be the next thing, you know. And by the way, unicorns, I personally don't care about unicorns because it's simply not my world. I simply don't care. You know, all I care is bringing business impact to Bosch and
Yes.
to the startups involved. And I don't care if it's a unicorn or if it's a smaller size company. It just doesn't matter. For me, is kind of like the question would be, where is $1 billion impact that we can bring into Bosch? And in that respect, I think it's still in the mobility space.
Very good. I think that's the perfect thing to end on, creating business impact together, internally, externally, however we do it. That's been Let's Accelerate. Thank you, Johannes and Sabrina.
Thank you.
thanks.
Awesome.
It was a
Have a good
pleasure.
time.